Well, it's not going to be quite as one-sided with the winners as last year. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. It's the final Friday before the 97th Academy Awards, so today I'm going to be talking about my picks and predictions for this year's Oscars. Not a bad way to spend my birthday. There are 50 films nominated across 23 categories, and just like the last few years, I had the opportunity to see every nominee. So I want to explain what I'm going to do here. Basically, for each category, I'm going to give you two picks. The first is my personal pick. It's the choice that I think was the best or most deserving and would be my vote if I actually had a vote. The second pick that I'm going to give you is the choice that I think is actually going to win. This will take into account not only the quality of the film, but also other contributing factors like the demographic makeup of the voting body, current events, and other award season wins. So basically, this is a should win, will win scenario. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. Remember, these are just my picks and predictions, so be sure to post your own personal predictions for the 2025 Oscars in the comments below. I've already reviewed many of these movies on this channel, so if you want to check those reviews out for some more in-depth thoughts on each of them, I'll put links in the description below and also link some of them up in the cards as we go along. I've also been posting a daily video short series ranking the films of each of the 23 Oscar categories, so I'll post the link to that playlist as well. Alright, let's get into the predictions. We'll go in the order that the categories were presented in last year, which admittedly was a little strange, and I'll put chapter shortcuts in the description to make it a bit easier to navigate. Actress in a supporting role. The nominees are Monica Barbaro in A Complete Unknown, Ariana Grande in Wicked, Felicity Jones in The Brutalist, Isabella Rossellini in Conclave, and Zoe Saldana in Emilia Perez. Feels pretty crazy to be leading off the predictions video with this category, but that's what they did with the order last year, so we're going with it. For me, this is kind of an odd selection of nominees. With the exception of Isabella Rossellini, everybody here was essentially a co-lead, with far more screen time than the typical supporting role. I do think all of these nominees were strong, so there aren't any complete surprises here, but my personal pick has to go to Ariana Grande for Wicked. Honestly, she was probably the biggest surprise of this film for me, and I thought she added just the right amount of levity and charm in this sugar-coated but jealousy-fueled rendition of Glinda the Good Witch. That said, I think the Academy is going to actually go with Zoe Saldana for Emilia Perez. With all of the awards love this film has inexplicably been getting, I find it hard to believe that perhaps its best aspect isn't going to get the top award. Animated short film. The nominees are Beautiful Men, In the Shadow of the Cypress, Magic Candies, Wander to Wonder, and Yuck. I can't say I'm in love with this category this year, but two of these films are real standouts for me. Magic Candies and In the Shadow of the Cypress. These are two very different films that I like for very different reasons. I love the beautiful hand-drawn animation style and bright sun-baked color palette of the dialogue-free In the Shadow of the Cypress, but at the same time, I really like the pseudo-claymation CG animation style and wondrously weird emotional journey on display in Magic Candies. They're basically tied for me, but for my personal pick, I'm going to give the slightest of edges to Magic Candies. For my actual pick, I'm also torn between two nominees. The whimsically creepy and meticulously crafted stop-motion animation of Wander to Wonder is probably the safer bet here, but I'm gonna go out on a little bit of a limb and say that In the Shadow of the Cypress is actually gonna win. That visual storytelling is just too powerful not to reward. Animated feature film. The nominees are Flow, Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, and The Wild Robot. I usually like this category, but I think this is the category that I'm most invested in this year, because it has the nominee that I most want to win. So my personal pick has to go to Flow. I also love The Wild Robot and Inside Out 2, but Flow is just the movie for me. It was my favorite film of last year, and I love how this dialogue-free movie uses impressive visual storytelling and a very unique animation style to tell its captivating and transcendent animal adventure story. So for my actual prediction, it's obviously going to be either Flow or The Wild Robot, right? I honestly think it's going to be a bit of a toss-up. The Wild Robot was in more theaters and had a bigger budget campaign, so it was definitely easier to see, which could influence things a bit. But Flow has been the little movie that could during this award season. So I've gotta do it. I've gotta give it all the support I can. I'm picking Flow to actually win. Original Screenplay. The nominees are Honora, The Brutalist, A Real Pain, September 5, and The Substance. This is often one of my favorite categories, even though I tend to be a bit confused by one or two of the nominee choices. That's sort of the case again this year, though definitely nowhere close to how things were last year. September 5 was definitely the unexpected nominee here, but I've gotta say, I really enjoyed that film, and I thought the screenplay was good. However, it is neither my personal pick nor my actual prediction. For my personal pick, it came down to The Substance and A Real Pain. As much as I loved the witty dialogue and humorously heartfelt story of A Real Pain, I gotta go with The Substance and its wild and thematically driven satire. Though, to be honest, I would be thrilled with a win for either of those films. However, as much as it pains me to say, I think Honora is gonna actually win this category. I know most people will disagree with my thoughts on this one, but for me, this was actually one of the worst screenplays of the year from an awards contender. I found it to be a painfully unfunny attempt at screwball comedy that was more irritating and depressing than enjoyable or meaningful. But I know I'm in the minority on that one. Adapted Screenplay. The nominees are A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Amelia Perez, Nickel Boys, and Sing Sing. So I know I probably ruffled a few feathers with that last category, but I imagine I'm gonna smooth them out a little bit here. This is usually one of the more challenging categories for me to predict, because it's hard to tell how the voters are gonna approach it. Are they gonna select the best adaptation, or are they just gonna select the best screenplay that happens to have been adapted? This year, we've got movies adapted from novels, nonfiction books, plays, and even an opera libretto. Sounds like it should be tough this year, but this is the easiest pick in this category for me in years. Without question, my personal pick easily goes to Conclave. Based on Robert Harris's 2016 novel of the same name, this adaptation is able to effectively capture the tension and intrigue of the book while giving the story a cinematic overhaul. Sing Sing might have an outside shot in this category, but I think the Academy is going to agree with me and give it to Conclave. Makeup and Hairstyling. The nominees are A Different Man, Amelia Perez, Nosferatu, The Substance, and Wicked. I'm not gonna lie, I really wish Sasquatch Sunset had managed to snag a nomination in this category, but we still ended up with an interesting set of nominees here. Maybe with one exception. I think in just about any other year, almost all of these would have had a really good chance. But this year, this is just one of those categories that I think is all but guaranteed. So my personal pick and my actual prediction has to go to The Substance. Impressive, subtle aging makeup gives way to more and more involved prosthetics before the gruesomeness of the body horror takes inhuman shape during the very memorable third act. The makeup and hair in this one is just so integral to the story and themes that it's hard to imagine any other outcome here. Production design. The nominees are The Brutalist, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Nosferatu, and Wicked. Even though I think we've got a pretty clear frontrunner here, I've gotta say, I do admire the variety of nominees we have. Whether we're talking large-scale sci-fi world-building, gothic horror castle location shooting, imposing concrete structures, remarkably recreated churches, or sugar-coated fantastical realities, we've got the bases covered this year. This one's a bit of a close call for my personal pick. I do really love the production design for Conclave. It's remarkable how grand it is without ever being overwhelming. It just feels like the real thing. In fact, coming out of the screening at TIFF this year, I overheard people questioning how the filmmakers managed to get permission to actually shoot at the Vatican. So the recreations were pretty impressive. That said, I think it's really hard to argue against Wicked here. The production design captures the elaborate, colorful fantasy that is the Land of Oz, to make the magic of this world come to life in a way that simply wouldn't be possible without the production design. So Wicked gets my personal pick, and I also think the Academy is going to agree with me. Costume design. The nominees are A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Gladiator 2, Nosferatu, and Wicked. As is often the case with this category, we've got a lot of period films here, but this year, we don't have any that fall into the traditional costume drama category. I guess Nosferatu sort of does, but I think the ethereal gothic horror twist gives it all a bit of a different flavor. However, as is also often the case with this category, I think things are really going to go hand in hand with production design this year. So my personal pick has got to go to Wicked. With its flashy array of elaborate Aussian costume designs, bright colors, and contrasting styles that are representative of the various characters, I think this is the one to beat this year. And once again, I think the Academy voters are going to agree with me on this. International Feature. The nominees are Amelia Perez from France, Flo from Latvia, The Girl with the Needle from Denmark, I'm Still Here from Brazil, and The Seed of the Sacred Fig from Germany. So I've gotta say, I'm both excited for and terrified by this category this year. There are 2 films in here that I love and would love to see win, but there's one in here that I'm very concerned about. So let's start with that concerning one. Amelia Perez. This is a genuinely baffling nomination for me in almost every category it's nominated in this year. I think this is a terrible film, but for reasons completely unknown and inexplicable to me, this movie has been doing remarkably well this award season. I do think that its momentum has slowed in recent weeks, but I've gotta say, I'm concerned that this one might end up winning. For me, there are 2 standouts in this category. I'm Still Here, with its fascinating and moving story and performances, is a powerful one that absolutely gut punches you when you realize it's based on a true story. And then, of course, Flo. I already gushed about Flo during the animated feature category, so you know that was my favorite film of last year. So as much as I loved I'm Still Here, I've got to go with Flo for my personal pick. I can't tell you how excited I was when I saw that it managed to nab the international feature nomination as well. Latvia's first, by the way. I had been hoping for it, I had my fingers crossed, but I honestly thought it had very little chance of getting the nomination, given some of the other films that came out last year. It's got very little chance of winning, but I'm still so happy it got nominated. For my actual prediction, I think things are going to play out differently. I just don't know how differently. Like I said before, I'm really nervous that Amelia Perez might win this one, but I'm gonna go with my gut, and I'm hoping the voters make good choices and pick I'm Still Here to win the Oscar. Actor in a supporting role. The nominees are Yora Borisov in Anora, Kieran Culkin in A Real Pain, Edward Norton in A Complete Unknown, Guy Pearce in The Brutalist, and Jeremy Strong in The Apprentice. The acting categories are all a little unusual this year. All 4 of them have very strong nominees, but all 4 of them also have at least one kind of unexpected nominee. In the case of supporting actor, I think the unexpected nominee is one that probably wasn't really deserving of the nomination. But that's just me. Jeremy Strong was fine and nailed the abrasive Roy Cohn impression, but I think there were better options in other Sebastian Stan films alone. Personally, I would have loved to have seen Adam Pearson get a nomination here, and I think he would have genuinely been in contention. I also thought Guy Pearce and especially Edward Norton were strong here, but my personal pick, without question, goes to Kieran Culkin. I saw A Real Pain at Sundance last year, and his performance just blew me away. Like many in the supporting actress category, he basically has a co-lead here, but really gives a career best performance that's both funny and heartbreaking, combining humor, magnetic charm, irritating volatility, and poignancy. I honestly can't really see the Academy picking anybody else, so I think they're gonna agree with me on this one and give the Oscar to Kieran Culkin. Visual effects. The nominees are Alien Romulus, Better Man, Dune Part 2, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and Wicked. I really don't understand what's been going on with this category the last few years. We obviously keep getting some fantastic and deserving nominees, but they come along with a few baffling ones as well. Alien Romulus is such a bizarre choice. I mean, the alien itself looks decent, and the zero-gravity acid scene was fun, but it's tough to overlook the generative AI-created Ian Holm. You know, the thing that garnered much of the film's criticism. And I know it's got its fans, but I also can't understand the Wicked nomination here. The hyper-glossy visuals were among my least favorite aspects of the film. For me, the most interesting nominees were all chimpanzee-based. The visual effects in Better Man were surprisingly well done, and just the right amount of weird to work for the story, but my personal pick goes to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This series has contained some of the most impressive CG and motion capture work of the last decade and a half, and this film further advances that technology to create incredibly photorealistic apes with impressive facial reactions and extremely expressive eyes. That said, I don't think it's gonna actually win, and instead, I think Dune Part 2 is gonna take home the Oscar. Tough to beat those sandworms. Film editing. The nominees are Anora, The Brutalist, Conclave, Amelia Perez, and Wicked. This is usually one of my favorite categories, but with only one exception, I found this to be kind of an underwhelming year. I mean, when Amelia Perez is my third choice in a category, you know something's wrong. I do think that the editing in The Brutalist was impressive, ensuring that this 215-minute long film never developed into a plodding behemoth, but my personal pick definitely goes to Conclave. Editing can really make or break the tension of a film, and here it makes it, adding to the suspense of not only the papal vote, but also the simultaneous investigations going on throughout the film. It kept the story tense, it kept it moving, and most importantly, it kept it engaging. I do think that The Brutalist has a shot in this category, and depending on how much the voters liked the film for other categories, Anora might also have an outside chance here too, but I am predicting that the Academy is gonna agree with me and choose Conclave as the winner. Documentary short subject. The nominees are Death by Numbers, I Am Ready, Warden, Incident, Instruments of a Beating Heart, and The Only Girl in the Orchestra. So overall, I think this is the weakest set of documentary shorts we've had in a while. It's not that most of them are bad, they're just kind of blah this year. We have a few that are especially weak, and we have a couple music and instrument-based shorts as well, which the Academy seems to like to nominate for this category for some reason, but my personal pick easily goes to Incident. Assembled exclusively from body cam and security footage, this is a powerful and infuriating film that truly speaks for itself. Now, I sometimes have a bit of trouble predicting the short's winners, and that is still the case this year. It might sound a little weird, but I think the results of this category are really going to depend on how charged up the Oscar voters are, and how much of a statement they want to make. If they are charged up, then I think Incident will have no problem taking this category. Structurally, it's a bit of an unconventional choice, but topically, you really can't get more charged. But if the voters don't go that direction, I think they're going to choose something comparatively more tame, and will probably go with the almost biopic-ish The Only Girl in the Orchestra, if only because it was available on Netflix, so more of them probably actually saw it. I really think it could go either way, but I'm predicting that they'll choose The Only Girl in the Orchestra. Documentary feature. The nominees are Black Box Diaries, No Other Land, Porcelain War, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, and Sugarcane. Unlike the documentary shorts category, the documentary features offer no lighthearted reprieve this year. We've got some heavy films focusing on some extremely tough topics. Although I personally would have liked to have seen Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, get a nomination here, I do think that the majority of these were very strong, and I can definitely understand how each of them got the nomination. For me, two of these really stood out from the rest though, and those were No Other Land and Sugarcane. Both are horrifying. Both are intense and affecting. So it's next to impossible for me to choose between them. But since I have to, I'm giving my personal pick to Sugarcane. Detailing the horrors of the Canadian Indian residential school system, this is an affecting story that's as much a call to action as it is a history lesson. I think it's possible that Sugarcane could win, but I would be very surprised if No Other Land came away from the night empty-handed. It's a devastatingly infuriating documentary that provides a heartbreakingly raw look at the community-level effects of the ongoing destruction in the West Bank. It's well made, it's topical, it's emotional. It's gonna win. Cinematography. The nominees are The Brutalist, Dune Part 2, Amelia Perez, Maria, and Nosferatu. Much like film editing, this is usually one of my favorite categories each year, because cinematography is typically something that I really notice about a film and am drawn to. But I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of an underwhelming set of nominees this year. There are several films that I would have rather had nominated over at least half of these. There's nothing outright bad about most of these, but I can't say I'm all that invested in or enthused about any of them. The cinematography was one of the better elements of Nosferatu for me, with its moody lighting and excellent use of shadows, but I've got to give my personal pick to The Brutalist. I think the return of the VistaVision format managed to capture the grandeur and imposing nature of the titular architecture, while still framing the human vulnerability of Laszlo Toth. I think this category is a bit up in the air, and I could potentially see realities in which any of the nominees, other than Maria, could win, but I think The Brutalist is going to actually come home with the Oscar. Live action short film. The nominees are Aline, Anuja, I'm Not a Robot, The Last Ranger, and The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent. So of the three shorts categories this year, live action easily had the best slate of nominees. Anuja was a little underwhelming simply because it felt so incomplete, but I really enjoyed all four of the other nominees. My personal pick goes to Aline, which I found to be a tense and compelling story that really puts the audience into the shoes of characters who are experiencing a terrifying immigration process that's all too real for many people. As far as who's actually going to win, I'm not so certain. I think it's going to come down to either Aline or The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent, which offered a powerful look at speaking up against injustice. I honestly think this could split either way, with essentially a 50-50 chance, but just to actually have a prediction down, I'm going to say Aline is going to come away with the Oscar. Sound. The nominees are A Complete Unknown, Dune Part 2, Amelia Perez, Wicked, and The Wild Robot. I know I've said it a couple times now with some of these categories, but sound is another one where I'm just not excited about the nominees this year. Again, it's not that I think any of these were bad when it came to sound. It's just that very few of them felt like they did anything particularly special with sound to me. In the past, we've had nominees where either the sound design or the sound editing have been integral to the way the story was told, but that's just not the case this year with any of the nominees. The Wild Robot was my favorite film of the bunch, and I thought Wicked did a decent job with mixing, given its status as a musical, but I think I've got to give my personal pick to A Complete Unknown. As the only music-based non-musical nominee this year, this was able to nicely balance the concert performances with the dialogue and city life aspects of the story. However, if past is precedent, then I think Dune Part 2 is actually going to win, just like Part 1 did. Original score. The nominees are The Brutalist, Conclave, Amelia Perez, Wicked, and The Wild Robot. Why is it that this category always seems to be one of the most frustrating? Every year now, it seems like there's at least one fantastic score that's shockingly missing from the list, and at least one that's bizarrely included. I, and I imagine just about everybody else, was very surprised by the omission of challengers from this list of nominees. That's the big one that I think most people can agree on, but I also would have loved to have seen a different man earn a nomination here. So for the actual nominees, I fully understand The Brutalist, Conclave, and The Wild Robot, but I just can't agree with the inclusion of either of the musicals here. My personal pick definitely goes to Conclave. It was one of the things that initially stood out to me the most when I watched that film, so I knew it was going to be getting a nomination. With its harshly percussive string-based composition, this score effectively layers these unsettling trilling sounds to increase the tension and enhance the story, simultaneously building suspense. Now, I do think it has the potential to win, and I think The Wild Robot even has a remote shot at a surprise wildcard win, but I think The Brutalist is actually taking home the Oscar for this one. Original song. The nominees are El Mal from Amelia Perez, The Journey from the 688, Like a Bird from Sing Sing, Mi Camino from Amelia Perez, and Never Too Late from Elton John, Never Too Late. Well, not the most exciting batch of nominees we've had, but also not the worst. This is a unique category for me this year, because the song I'm most rooting for is neither my personal pick nor my prediction. I don't think it's the best song, it wasn't the most enjoyable to listen for me, but I really want The Journey from the 688 to win, because at this point, I just want Diane Warren to get that Oscar. I know she has the honorary Oscar they gave her in 2022, but I just can't help but root for her here. This is her 16th Oscar nomination, and the 8th year in a row that she's been nominated, making us all track down some random movie that didn't have any other nominations. And yet, she's come away empty-handed every single time. So come on, Diane, let's get it this year. That said, my personal pick is El Mal. Judging purely on the song, of course, the in-film placement, driving percussive vocals, and catchy tune make it this year's standout nominee, even though I can't stand the film. It's been doing well so far this award season, and again, it's very catchy, so I'd be incredibly surprised if it didn't actually win the Oscar. Still, come on, Diane. Actor in a leading role. The nominees are Adrien Brody in The Brutalist, Timothée Chalamet in A Complete Unknown, Colman Domingo in Sing Sing, Ralph Fiennes in Conclave, and Sebastian Stan in The Apprentice. Another acting category and another nominee that makes you go, how'd they get a nomination? Okay, so Sebastian Stan isn't bad in this movie or anything. I mean, he gives a much more nuanced than expected performance, but it borders on uncanny and is still a bit of a surprise this year. The other four, I completely get, and honestly, I wouldn't be upset with any of them winning. I think we've got to give Timothée Chalamet some credit for the extensive musical preparation he underwent for this role, but my personal pick goes to Ralph Fiennes for his role as Cardinal Lawrence in Conclave. Like the score, and the cinematography, which wasn't nominated in this case, his layered performance really stood out to me when I first saw this film at TIFF. It's just so full of conflict, strength, and even humor that seems unexpected but really works. In a career full of fantastic performances, I think this may very well be one of his finest. In terms of the actual winner, I think this could potentially go a number of ways. Timothée Chalamet's win at the SAG Awards definitely gives him a little bit of momentum and a shot, and I also think Ralph Fiennes has a decent chance. But I think the Oscar is probably going to go to Adrien Brody this year. Directing. The nominees are Sean Baker for Anora, Brady Corbett for The Brutalist, James Mangold for A Complete Unknown, Jacques Audiard for Amelia Perez, and Coralie Farge for The Substance. So I've got to admit, most years I'm not all that excited about this category. Historically, the winner of Best Picture also wins Best Director more often than not. It's like 76% of the time. And considering two of the main frontrunners for Best Picture are also nominated here, I have a feeling that we're probably going to be seeing that again. Aside from the absurdity of another big Amelia Perez nomination, I think this category is full of expected and some good nominees. For my personal pick, I've definitely got to go with Coralie Farge for The Substance. I think she easily had the clearest and boldest directorial vision of all of these nominees, and if she were to win, she would be only the fourth woman to ever do so. I do think she has an outside shot at actually winning, but I'm predicting that it's either going to come down to Sean Baker or Brady Corbett, and that is probably going to be determined by whether or not either of their films win Best Picture. If they do, then I think they're also going to win this. They're not going to split the two awards. But if another movie wins Best Picture, then we've got a little bit more uncertainty here. If you had asked me a month ago, I probably would have predicted Corbett, but with the way the award season has been going so far, I think Sean Baker is probably going to walk away with that Oscar. Actress in a leading role. The nominees are Cynthia Erivo in Wicked, Carla Sofia Gascon in Amelia Perez, Mikey Madison in Anora, Demi Moore in The Substance, and Fernanda Torres in I'm Still Here. So I think this is going to be the most interesting race in the acting categories. It's also going to be one of the more stressful for me to watch, just because I really like two of them and I really dislike two of them. At this point, you guys know my feelings about Amelia Perez, and we can multiply that tenfold in this category given the whole situation with Gascon and her vile statements. The one that I think people will disagree with me on is my dislike of Mikey Madison's performance in Anora. I found it to be an unlikable performance and a wholly unlikable film, but I will give her credit for giving her all to bring chaotic life to this abrasive and unsympathetic character. But what about the ones I liked? For me, it comes down to either Demi Moore or Fernanda Torres. I thought Torres gave an incredibly heartbreaking, strong-willed performance in I'm Still Here that really provided the emotional core of the film. But I also thought Demi Moore and her performance as half of this twisted, unglamorous, symbiotic relationship was incredibly impressive and probably a career best from her. I think both performances were fantastic, but I've got to give the slightest of edges and my personal pick to Demi Moore. But what about the actual winner? This is where things get a little potentially chaotic. I really think we have a bit of a three-way race here between Demi Moore, Fernanda Torres, and Mikey Madison. I could honestly see this going to any of them. If Anora is sweeping the categories it's nominated for, I think we might be seeing a decent chance for a Madison win. But I also think there's a really good chance that Fernanda Torres might do what her mother was unable to do and actually win this category. But then we've got Demi Moore, who's won at the majority of the big award ceremonies leading up to the Oscars. Honestly, I would be equally happy with a Moore or Torres win, but I'm predicting that Demi Moore is gonna be up on that stage, Oscar in hand, preferably not reenacting the third act of The Substance. Best Picture. The nominees are Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Amelia Perez, I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance, and Wicked. Well, this isn't my favorite set of Best Picture nominees, and there are certainly a couple in here that are baffling to me, Amelia Perez, but we've still got a few very good standouts. I'm Still Here was definitely the surprise nominee of the bunch, but I think it was one of the best, and I found it to be a fascinating and moving true story of resilience. I also really enjoyed The Substance, and always love to see horror films get some awards recognition, so that would be amazing to see. But I think I've got to give my personal pick to Conclave. I found this to be a gripping dramatic thriller of faith, doubt, and secrecy. Great score, great cinematography, excellent script, and some phenomenal performances make this the one to beat for me. Unlike last year, I think this is going to be an exciting category on Oscar night. Don't get me wrong, I loved Oppenheimer, but we all knew that that was going to be winning in almost all of its categories, so it wasn't much of a surprise when it won Best Picture. But I think there are a lot of films potentially in the running this year. The Substance is unlikely, but you never know, and I'm definitely nervous that the Academy is going to go crazy and pick Amelia Perez out of nowhere, but I've gotten slightly less concerned about that over the last few weeks. But still, I really think the three most likely possibilities here are Conclave, The Brutalist, and Anora. I wouldn't be surprised if it went to any of those three. It seemed like Conclave was kind of out of the conversation, but then it just won at SAG, and The Brutalist had a bit of controversy surrounding it with the AI stuff, so this is a really tough choice. I feel like I might be going out on a bit of a limb here, and it's certainly not the result that I want to see, but I think Anora is gonna actually win. Alright, so there you have it. My picks and predictions for the 97th Academy Awards. These were just my thoughts on the likely outcome of this year's Oscars, but I'd love to hear your predictions too, so be sure to post them in the comments below. I've already reviewed some of these movies, so I've put links to those videos in the description below, and you can check those out if you want some more in-depth discussion of each, as well as my ratings, pros and cons, and even tailored film recommendations. And if you're interested in buying any of these Oscar-nominated movies, I do have affiliate links to all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. Also, be sure to check out my 23 category Oscar ranking series and come back after the Oscars to see how I did with my predictions in my final Oscar video of the year. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe if you're at it to see more videos like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.